If there was one genre of music that was my desert island genre of music, it would have to be systems music from America, late 19th, 20th century. People like Riley, Reich, Glass, Adams, and all of their derivatives like Devendra Bernhardt, Sufjan Stevens, Tangerine Dream. For me, systems music is audio mathematics, but the beautiful mathematics, geometry. For me, mathematics explains what we see and understand in nature. So when you apply that kind of geometric mathematical logic to music, you get to hear the thing that is so beautiful in nature that connects us all, Euclides' elements. So I'm delighted today to share with you my tips for constructing a systems track using samples, namely the new Spitfire Audio Kepler Orchestra. Details down in the video descriptions below. Of all the systems composers, I have to say my god is Steve Reich, and whilst his Music for 18 Musicians, particularly the original recording with him and his band, is his Rite of Spring, it's not until you get to the desert music that you really start having some fun. Are you really allowed to do that with an orchestra? It seems you can. So I'm not going to do a version of desert music, but I'm going to kind of take the gauntlet on from what Steve Reich did with the desert music and create something for 2019, something with the world, his wife, and all of their kitchen sinks in. It started with me writing the trailer for Kepler Orchestra, and this is where I got to. Right, so that's where I left it last week. What I've done over the last couple of days is take it a lot bigger. A lot bigger. But first, just a couple of tips. It can be a bit of a CPU hog, especially if you use this quantise in function, which basically is as close as we can get to scripting contact so it looks ahead. What it does is it just waits for the next beat division depending on this selection here. This is great for jamming, so it keeps everything kind of in time. I'm just going to put the metronome through the output so you can hear. If we're hard quantised to the 1, what'll happen is it'll come in on the next 8th note here. So let's just have a listen to that with the click in. Actually sounds great, but it's not what I wanted. I wanted it to be on the beat. So naturally the thing to do is to simply unquantize it. Once you played it in, make sure that you're hard quantized here. So let's go there, quantize to 4s. And that should now be nice and tight. So as with all of our samples, we cut to the beginning of the articulation, not to the beginning of the note. So when the action of the rosin striking the string hits, that's when we cut to, not when the string starts vibrating to make a note. It is only a minuscule difference, but you do have to account for it. So what I do here is just pull it back there, and this should be on the beat now. It has a beautiful natural feel, and in this demo I have pretty much everything with quantise off. But if you want it to sound really super tight, I don't know if I'm imagining, I still think it's tighter with the quantise in. So if you want to use that, I would put it forward an 8th and then it'll be on the 1. So let's have a listen to that. However, However, it will, particularly if you're using this mix selection that Paul and I made of the close and the mid-range. If you're using two mics, you've got to imagine you've got two dynamics working there. You've got loads of chords. It's doing so much grunt work, plus this script. It will turn Kepler into a razorback of a system hog. So just make sure, once you're happy, just freeze it, or whatever the equivalent is on your DAW. Right. So let's have a rundown of what I've got up to here. You'll see that the whole track is very laden with automation. So I look forward to taking you through everything that I got up to there, all the naughty business. So let's start off with these drones. Now, Kepler comes in two formats. It's a systems grid where you have different rhythms and different subdivisions of those rhythms. And then the Mercury engine for the warped Kepler orchestral material. The minute we heard the orchestra playing this stuff, I looked at Paul and went, we'll need to morph this then. So this is the sound of the drone, which is what I'm starting with. The thumping is created by this long, slow tremolandi. Which I've also automated. I've then got the good old EXS24 sine wave. So basically, it's the internal sampler within Logic. If you don't load a sound into it, it has the world's greatest sine wave. Again, with that tremolo, you possibly can't hear it. It's very low, but you definitely can feel it. You'd notice it if it was gone. Now, one of my favourite sounds in Kepler is these high strings muted tremolandi. They're like little flourishes. And what I've done with this is automated them up in waves. And you'll hear in a minute that they're actually like an answering phrase for the woodwinds. Now, another thing that I've discovered recently with orchestral samples is pitching stuff down, way, way down. I really recommend, if you do have any orchestral samples, for you to try this. Find a high violin harmonics patch. The one in Tundra is insane. Pitch that down so you can play it in the cello registers, and you'll get lost down a rabbit hole of artifacts and wonderment. So I took that tremolandi sound that you just heard, and I've taken it down 24 semitones. That's 2 octaves. Okay, now because it's taken down massively, and as before I said, Kepler, if you're not careful, can be a real razorback of a system hog. Because it's pitched down, it's having to do loads of calculations to keep that in time. So I've had to freeze that. But let me just unfreeze it for now and take you through bit by bit. So let's hear that at its original pitch. I mean, quite an incredible sound. And then down 24. Bit of top. Bit of delay. Loads of sub bass. And I've got a bit of high cut there, which I automate in at the beginning. Distortion, and a low cut or high pass filter, as we'd also call them, just to control that bottom end. So here you'll see the woodwinds, which are absolutely insane. I've done a diagonal grouping here, so there's all sorts of cross rhythms playing off each other, and the net effect is not something that's studiously considered. It's more, well, it just makes me sound like a woodwind orchestration genius playing it in literally live. Just absolutely stunning. And then if we have a listen to it with that tremolandi thing I talked about earlier. So next up are our more standard Steve Reishi chugs, and you'll see the way I've organised these in waves, both with expression and with the dynamic control here. And there's also some automation coming up here. So let's just go in a little bit later on. The cello muted, consort on, playing down a register. And then there's this thing called Callisto, which is another one of these warp sounds, but it has a very brassy quality. You can hear where it came from. Let's have a listen to that. Similar to the winds, it just makes you sound like you've orchestrated something complex and extraordinary. Extraordinary sounds. And my favourite technique, col legno, where they play with the back of the bow. And again, it's lovely. You can do this with short samples, but it's something about repeated notes that when you get the actual players to play them, there's just something a lot more magical, mainly because the strings are already ringing out when they hit them again. So you're not just re-triggering, almost like if you can imagine something that's been damped. So let's have a listen to this bit. Now, something that Kepler allows you to do by doing the chuggy repeated stuff, that masks all sorts of trickery that you can employ to take other libraries and make them sound systemsy. So let's just have a listen to this section. This is the high and low col legno tratto, which is where they're actually bowing with the back of their bow. Usually, it doesn't make any sound at all, but because there's so many string players on this library, you get a kind of a tone. You'll also hear there's loads of artifacts and stuff because it's so ridiculously quiet. Now, for my money, I believe that sound has just been recently used on the Star Wars trailer. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it certainly sounds like it. But what we've got going on here, which is quite cheeky, is we've got this tremolando here. Sorry, I just have to mention that I've also notched out lots of clicks and little kind of harmonic-y things. So we've got tremolando here, and what we gradually do is there's a real hint of it here. Kind of feel it ever so slightly, and then okay, it sounds great. It doesn't. It sounds more like an orchestral trance synth. But once you put the Steve Reishi stuff on the top, you totally buy it. And this is one of the most exciting sounds I've made in a long time. Extraordinary. Very happy with myself there. Moving away from Kepler, I put some brass in at the end. Combination of the straight Iceni low brass here. Albion Iceni is a library of massive kind of low end. Big forces adopted, woodwinds, brass and strings. And then also these nasty ones here, very bad boys indeed. They have a real brightness to them, so I'm just bringing them in just to add an extra bit of rasp at the very end here. So let's hear them on their own. Bitey. We've got these Iceni synths here, which are just insane. Let's have a listen to what they sound like without my business. And then I've added my favourite plugin, pitched them up 1200 cents, and I've blended the effect. So let's just hear the right-hand one. Added some distortion for more filth, and I've tracked them with the left-hand side here. Mummy. I've also tracked an 808 kick, the greatest kick of all time. And they do have a pitch component to them that really fattens it out. And you may ask, am I allowed to put reverb on an 808? Yes, I am. Now, if you thought that reverb was unwarranted, I've also got the Darwin Percussion Ensemble from Albion 1 to do some low, heavy stuff and then some high anvil hits. But that wasn't sounding big enough for me. So what I did is I duplicated the track and I put a huge reverb on that's 100% mix. I filtered out all sorts of bottom and mid and really pushed out the very high mids here. And that's something worth remembering with reverbs. You know, they don't have to muddy your track up. You can just use the bits of them that you like. Now, the reason I've stuck them on their own track is I want to musically control what's usually called the early reflection, i.e. the time it takes until the actual reverb is triggered. By putting them on separate tracks, I could musically control that. And this is really quite extreme. But again, when you hear the track later, it gives an even more epic feel to it. We've also got some deep Easter Island hits. It was all going very well, and then I thought I maybe need just one more melodic element for these slightly more textural moments. So I decided to record some piano. The felt is great when you're using it very much kind of isolated and out there, but when it's in with other instruments, it can create some kind of frequency problems. So you'll see that not only have I applied some EQ to take some of those awkward harmonics out, really boost the top end, I've also done something a bit cheeky. I've actually automated one of these harmonics. When I change chord, it really boosts out. So let's just maybe have a listen without the automation. Gets very muffled again, so let's have a listen with the automation. And then I recorded two shimmels tracked, and I've reversed the left and right, so it really felt like two track pianos kind of facing each other. And this is with the felt off. Really extreme EQ there, but the track is absolutely rinsing at this point, so it's to make it really bite through. I also, for a little bit of whimsy, put a Celeste on the top of that shimmel. Not happy with orchestras, 808s and pianos, I decided to employ the services of this absolute bastard. If you want to see how I went about making the modular patch for this piece, click on the video link down below. It's a thing called Modular Mondays that I do on my vlog once a week, which is me kind of getting out of the box. Okay, so since that session, I basically stemmed out all of the different voices from the modular synth, including this live jam I did with Mutable Instruments, Clouds, and the bass sound. And it's got something really kind of quite unnerving about it, like a voice screaming in the distance. Again, lots of things with this tremolo on, so we're keeping this Steve Reichy kind of chugging stuff. Then I employed the bass on the modular, and again, we've got all sorts of filters here, so let's just go through everything that we've applied. Nice kind of pine cones there. What you're hearing is actually the modular patch generating that kind of pattern with a bunch of LFOs, both opening the filter kind of, that will altering the shape of the waveform, and also the amplitude. But it's a hybrid piece, so I really wanted to make use of all of these wonderful plugins. So I've added a whole bunch. Spreader, compressor, distortion, sub bass, bit of EQ, make it fatter and brighter at the top. And then some fun filtering. And to make it even tighter, some tremolo. Now, obviously, these came in audio, and I decided to change the chords up a bit here, and I needed a B, and I hadn't played one, so I just stuck some AU pitch on, took it down from a C. So that's just separated off, so I don't have to do any fancy automation. Then one of these beautiful modular voices. So just a bit of delay, and then I'm basically doing a low-pass filter slowly opening up. Similar thing with this voice. And then a high-pass filter opening for this voice. Great stuff. And then I duplicated these modular pieces here and did some fun with pitching down an octave and distorting. So let's have a listen there. And the same approach with this one as well. I've also got this rising pitch aspect of it, and because it's a blend of pitches, it's great. You've got the top note stays uniform with this bending up underneath. Lots of juicy delays. Our hi-hats from the modular. Then I basically took the sound of the drums that we played earlier, sampled those, reversed them, and put some naughty business through those as well. Last but by far not least, we've got this amazing brass Doppler effect here. So let's have a listen to that unprocessed. Awesome. And then with delay. Its own massive reverb. So I've stemmed this into 3 stems. This is purely for mixing purposes. We've got an orchestra, the rest of mix, and the end stem. So basically with the orchestra, I've gone for a very realistic sound. So basically I've got these 2 mastering instances installed, but then bypassed for the majority of the cue until we get to the end, where I really wanted to eke out certain frequencies so it still cut through and it didn't get too muddy. And now with. So we're really pushing up the tops. We've taken out a lot of the murk there, dipped back some of the high mids and chopped off the bottom. And there's a pretty harsh compressor going in there. I've also got some harsh outs for the rest of the mix and the orchestra. It's quite interesting. If I just actually take this off for a sec. It's a pretty cool sound, but it also has something slightly kind of, I don't know, tape delay about it, whereas the end of this section here actually sounds quite kind of creepy John Carpenter-ish. So basically what I did is I just recorded that, sampled it, made it into audio, and I've just basically put the end brass and the end delay sample that I've just made into their own bus. I've pulled the rug from under the feet of the rest of mix stem and the orchestra stem, leaving the reverb, which is auxiliary 1, that still bleeds through. So the net result is something that sounds like, and let's just mute those two. This is the master bus, and I've basically got some mastering compression that controls just the very highest kind of amplitude levels. I've given it just the tiniest bit on the top, and again, chopped the bottom off so it all becomes efficient, and slammed it through the L3 Ultra Maximizer to up my odds, so I'm worth an each way bet at least for the loudness wars. So here's my piece inspired by the new Kepler Orchestra. I have to congratulate the team for executing such a complex concept, and to Paul for coming up with such a mad but brilliant concept in the first place. It is now my favourite library that Spitfire has ever done. I am biased because, as I said, I'm a lover of minimalist systems music, and I know that we say we're excited about everything we do, but this is my favourite. Thanks as always for watching. Do subscribe if you haven't done. Lots of interesting stuff coming up. Ding that bell if you want to be notified the next time we put up a film, and one of those always appreciated if you've liked these. And last but absolutely not least, we're fascinated to hear what you do with these libraries. So if you have a SoundCloud link that you want to share, or a Dropbox to an MP3, link them down below in the comments. And remember, a lot of composers will be checking out these pages for these libraries and stuff like that. You never know. Okay, so let's play it down. I do request you listen to it incredibly loud through awesome speakers or an excellent set of headphones with lots of bottom end. See you next time.